been told that the live stream is on, so just for you to know already, and of course for you to know that this is indeed filmed and presented on the internet as we speak. A very warm welcome to you all to this session, and thank you for joining us from the main conference center. You found your way. Congratulations for this first day of the Finance in Common Summit. This session is dedicated to the ocean, a very important topic, of course, for all of us, and your presence here shows it very well. Its name, Mobilizing Finance for a Sustainable Blue Economies, Opportunities for PDBs Ahead of the UN Ocean Conference, a topic we started discussing yesterday with some of you. My name is Mathilde Borlerance. I'm the head of climate and nature at the French Development Agency, and I'll be very pleased to moderate this panel. We may have some changes already in the setup of the panel because we are waiting for our keynote speaker, His Excellency Jean Leon, who is within the Executive Committee of the Finance in Commons. There's been a little bit of delay due to the very good launch session and plenary session this morning. We'll give him time after a first round of discussion with our esteemed panelists. Maybe I would like then to start with giving some contextual elements. So first, again, thank you for joining. You see the setup is a table, it's a U table. For if there's still room at the table, you can sit, don't be shy. The idea is to, of course, leave room to the speakers to present their practices and views of the topic, but also to, as much as possible, try to have an open discussion and hear from various banks and partners here in the room their views of the topics that we are discussing today. We here because notably we have launched in September 2023, so at the last Finance in Common Summit in Cartagena, this coalition on ocean, which was a missing piece of the sectoral coalition of the finance in common. We were 9 at the beginning, EIB, EBRD, CDP, KfW, BOAD, IDB, ADB, CAF, and AFD, and now we're 11 because the French CDC has joined us, as well as the Turkish Bank of Development. But we know we are not the only one, of course, to work on this topic, and willing to discuss the content of this coalition, the content of this work, and to have your views around it. We'll have further discussions, even for those who are willing to join, further working discussions along these 3 days of the Finance in Common Summit. This coalition is a coalition of the willings. It's been told already. It's a name which has been used in the plenary this morning. I like it. I think that's really the spirit of our work. We do, all of us, recognize the crucial role played by our ocean, both for climate and nature. And we also recognize that indeed there are opportunities for our activities there, but also threats related to some of the development related to the ocean economy, and we are cautious of that. And this is certainly one of the reasons why we are joining forces to share knowledge, to share practices, to try to build common standards as much as we can, and of course to do more and better on this critical topic of ocean and blue economy financing. This is, of course, done knowing that we have in mind that in a bit more than 3 months There is the third UN Ocean Conference, UNOC 3, which is going to be organized in Nice, in France. Together, France is co-hosting with Costa Rica this very important conference, and it's a way for us also to participate in the mobilization towards this very important conference. I'd like, before I start really with the panel discussion, to acknowledge the work of Adrien Lindon, who is here, who is the coordinator of this coalition. Thank you very much, Adrien, for organizing this session. He's here for the whole week, the rest of the week, because it's already well advanced. You now have his face in mind, so if you don't manage to catch up with us directly after this session, don't hesitate to grasp him and to spend some time with him to discuss further if we can achieve additional things together. So, without further ado, I will start with the first part of the panel, and then we will interrupt to accommodate for Jean Leon's keynote a bit later. So I'm very pleased to introduce the roundtable panelists. So we have Mr. Tomoyuki Kimura. Thank you for joining us. Special Senior Advisor to the President and Director General Strategy, Policy and Partnership Department of the Asia Development Bank, one of the founding members of this coalition. We have Mrs. Alicia Montalvo, a Manager for Climate Action and Positive Biodiversity. I love your title, I should change mine. Of the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF. Thank you, Alicia. We have Mr. Mubarak Mukaila, Senior Executive Development and Climate Finance. You have to put positive biodiversity in your title too very soon, of the West African Development Bank as well. And we have Mrs. Ariane Steinsmeyer, Director, Global Outreach and Engagement of the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, ORA. Well known, of course, for all of us working in this area. And eventually, but not least, of course, Mr. Shashwat Koirala, Sustainable Ocean Economy Lead and Climate Transitions at the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Thank you all of us for joining. The structure, the idea of the roundtable is really to discuss about, of course, PDBs, what we are doing and what we can do better, how we can bring in innovative solutions to accelerate sustainable ocean economy financing, and of course listen to all stakeholders involved and get your recommendation and advice on how to foster collaboration for the ocean. You'll see in the mix of panelists that we're going to hear from experiences from 3 continents, which is already, of course, very important because it's indeed a topic important for all of us. To start the discussion, I'll give you the floor, Shashwat, to set the scene, actually, because, of course, the OECD has done a lot of work and is continued work ongoing, so I guess you share some of this work and what you are preparing ahead of UNOC, notably. A lot of work to help us also analyzing what PDBs and what ODA is doing in this area of ocean financing. So, what are the key trends, challenges in public ODA, and of course, hearing your recommendation on how we can enhance our contribution, please, Shashwat.
Thank you, Mathilde, and it's a pleasure to be here today. So my name is Shashwat, and as Mathilde mentioned, I currently lead our work on the sustainable ocean economy. Our work is really focused on the nexus between sustainable ocean economy and development cooperation, and here we know that PDBs play a really instrumental role. And so I wanted to maybe start with saying a little bit about why we're focusing on ocean finance. Why are we singling out the ocean in broader discussions of financing for sustainable development? The idea is not to create, a niche, new, separate agenda, But we focus on ocean finance because it's transversal, right? So if you think about climate and decarbonizing maritime transport, that's part of the ocean economy. If you think about biodiversity, protecting marine ecosystems is part of the ocean economy. If you think about development broadly, livelihoods, fisheries, that's all part of the ocean economy. So when we're thinking in a context where there are pressures on public budgets, the ocean is a really wonderful domain where we can kind of get gains across all of these different agendas if we kind of think together about how that can happen. So it's really, and this is something that we iterate at the OECD, and it's a core of our work, is that it's not a niche topic. It touches on a lot of things, but it has historically been underappreciated or underfunded. And so that's really a trend that we're trying to reverse. The ocean is also an area where we're seeing a lot of changes. So there are some economic transformations. The OECD modeling that's due to come out at the end of March shows that in the past 25 years, the ocean economy has grown substantially, and in some cases outpaced the growth of the global economy. But developing countries, especially lower income and lower middle income countries, capture a very small share of the global value added. So there's an untapped potential for development. We also see that there are a lot of policy shifts, right? So new multilateral environmental agreements, or recent ones, including the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the negotiations for a plastics treaty, as well as the High Seas BB&J Treaty. They're changing the obligations that many countries, including lower income countries, will have or already have. So in this context, really thinking about how we can support and finance the ocean is a key element of broader discussions on financing for sustainable development. So having said that, there is still not enough money. And this is something that we're working on as a part of our work stream on development cooperation. And there are three kind of challenges that we've identified for why money doesn't flow into a sustainable ocean economy. The first is really the macroeconomic challenges. So for many developing countries, issues like high debt, public pressures on public budgets mean that there is limited fiscal capacity to finance many of the priorities related to the ocean. And so this is not new. This is an issue that we see across agendas. The second is project level barriers. So whether there are financial barriers like high project development costs or non-financial barriers like just lack of knowledge. They mean that certain things in the ocean at the project level are difficult to finance for, especially for private investors. And the final, and this one I won't talk a lot about today, but is really a question of policy coherence. Especially when we think about how much money goes into subsidies that finance harmful activities on the ocean, and especially when we think about fisheries. So that policy coherence means that there's a lot of money that can be channeled away elsewhere, and especially towards more sustainable ocean activities. So these are the three challenges we've identified, but especially the first two is where we see a really big role for development assistance and PDBs in particular. But for a long time, we didn't know how much money was going to the ocean and how much development assistance was going to the ocean. And at the OECD, we developed this methodology for tracking ODA for the ocean economy. And what we see is that while the amount of attention and financing has increased, it's still not enough. So current estimates show that only about, in 2022, only about 3.5 billion of ODA targeted the ocean economy. When you put that in perspective, that's about 1% of total global ODA, and even a smaller share, about 0.8% of total global ODA, supported activities for sustainable ocean resource use and conservation. So it's any money that is flowing from development assistance to the ocean is not always sustainable. It's also heavily concentrated. So three sectors, maritime transport, conservation, and fisheries, account for roughly 75% of all ODA spending on the ocean. And this often comes at the expense of some of the more emerging sectors, so offshore renewables, marine biotechnology, that warrant both financial and capacity support. And the final point I want to make here is also a question of targeting. What we see is that ocean economy related official development assistance doesn't always flow to the countries with the highest needs. And this is particularly true in some of our work that we did on plastic pollution, where plastics related ODA did not go to countries with the highest incidence of plastics leakage. So there's a mismatch between supply and demand. So there are these problems, and what are we at the OECD doing to address it? So we're developing this guidance on development cooperation for a sustainable ocean economy, which is due to be launched at the 3rd UN Ocean Conference. And it's really meant to help development partners and PDBs to kind of structure their interventions in the ocean space. And maybe if in the last few minutes, I just wanted to highlight 3 recommendations that are coming out of this work that might be relevant for public development banks. The first is on the transparency of ocean finance. So I mentioned we've done some tracking, but it's a really incomplete picture, especially if you look at the domestic level for public finance. Most countries do not systematically track financing for ocean priorities. And so this is something that really needs to be addressed in broader support for public finance management and domestic resource mobilization. But even at the level of development banks, a kind of a coalition of the willing, as you mentioned, and a kind of systematic approach to tracking how much money goes towards ocean priorities is fundamental. And in this guidance that we're developing, we've kind of created a little bit of a simple framework to identify key issue areas, especially for developing countries, that can be used flexibly by different stakeholders. The second is really about the resources and the money itself. It's easy to say we need to scale up support for the ocean, and that's true. But in the guidance, what we also want to highlight is the importance of targeting and resource mobilization beyond ODA. And for targeting, I think one of the key elements is that many countries are developing sustainable ocean plans or strategies, and they are a really ideal basis for kind of identifying where financial resources should go. And in terms of resource mobilization, this covers, of course, domestic resource mobilization, but also private finance mobilization. And this is something we can have a conversation afterwards as well. But in this guidance, we go at the level of the instruments. So there are multiple instruments that are emerging. Not all of them will be useful for all cases or all countries or all sectors. So we try to identify specific use cases and the specific role that development partners play in scaling them up. And the final point is really about partnerships and integration. So at the beginning I said, the ocean economy and the ocean agenda is not a niche agenda, and it's not. But what we also need to be careful is that when we increase attention for ocean, we don't fragment the current architecture more. And the way we do this is very simple. Maybe it's not as simple in practice, but conceptually it's very simple, is that there are many taxonomies, standards that already exist. So in kind of thinking about what is needed in the ocean, I think there should be a concerted effort to kind of align with standards that exist, but also in developing new standards, because there may be new use cases or new audiences, making sure that they align with what already exists. And the final point, and maybe this is a little bit of a bird's eye view in terms of integration, is that we'll hear as we kind of move forward towards UNOC, but also in the developments of a global plastics treaty and any other treaties that might emerge, the need to finance the ocean as a global public good. And that is an essential part of the overall financing picture. But there again, I think it's important to really think about complementarities that already exist across agendas. So we don't create necessarily a dedicated financing institution for the ocean unless there's a rationale for it. Or if there's demand and we can't find it in other financing mechanisms. But really thinking about the complementarities will go a long way in avoiding fragmentation. So I'll stop there, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very clear and very good to kickstart our discussion. I think the list of recommendations is already very clear, and thank you indeed for bringing in the fact that, of course, in addition to UNOC, there's a much more, I would say, complex agenda, and that we see where the environment is being more and more important, and notably with the plastic treaty, which is going to be very, very relevant. Let me move to you, Mubarak, to have your views, and notably on your activities in West Africa, where we know that marine ecosystems are facing multiple pressure. We know also that BOAD has worked on this topic. And with this regional footprint, can you share with us your experience, please?
Thank you very much. I would like to put a bit of context before I start. Like you said, rightly said, we cover the West African region, and it's one of the poorest region on Earth, where each development project is an important and very sound project. But unfortunately, we are faced with two challenges, and the first is the capacity and the development of the projects, which we, as the West African Development Bank, and with the support of the French Development Agency, we have put together a project development facility that supports project development. And this has been implemented for about a year and a half now, and we can see concrete results. I was actually speaking with the GCF team this morning, very happy about how within 6 months we were able to develop a SAP project, submitted to the GCF, and then approved at the last board. And it was one of the kind within 6 months. You know how difficult it is to mobilize resources at the GCF. So we don't really have any issues to mobilize resources. And very recently as well, we have done an hybrid bond in the capital markets, and we've mobilized about $500 million US to finance fund projects and everything. But one of the issues that we have, and which is the second problem that we have, is the quality of the resources that we have. Because yet we have money in the capital market, we have money from our partners, but it's not money adapted to development projects, because you cannot use capital market money and do that. So one of the things that we are doing and looking at is where can we find more concessional resources. And I was talking to the colleagues from CDC as well this morning, where I was telling them that it's true and it's a fact. Even development countries right now don't have the money to continue supporting the concessional resources that we usually look at. So we need to find other types of sources to mobilize those concessional resources. And one of the areas where we have very quickly identified as the West African Development Bank is the carbon markets, where we believe that allow us to tap into resources that we were not able to tap into before. And the West African Development Bank, with the support of the German government, has put together the West African Alliance for Carbon Market and Climate Finance, where we are actually trying to develop and design an architecture in the region to actually benefit from the carbon markets. It's quite difficult, it's complicated, but we are getting there. We are working with single countries to kind of harmonize the framework, the legal arrangement, and all that to be able to mobilize that area and that sector. But the BEWAD itself has a lot of, we have done a mapping in the region, and we have analyzed with the definition of the African Union on oceans. It's not only the seas, the oceans, but it's also rivers, lakes, wetlands, and so on and so forth. So one of the analysis that we've done, and we are developing a project right now with the GCF, where we are looking at migration issues. When you look at migration issues right now, they are in our region, mostly they are around the the Niger River, around the Lake Chad, or the Nile River. When you look at the security issues that are involving in the region, they kind of come from that region. And it's mainly due to the fact that there is no economic life anymore in those regions because of the drought situation around the Lake Chad and all that. So we're working with the IOM to see how we can recreate that ecosystem around those regions to be able to create a livelihood around those regions, to make sure that people have economic life, people have means to actually live, to do agriculture, to do their livestock, and so on and so forth. So we are discussing right now with GCF to see how we can push that project to be able to mobilize resources to create that, and to fight not only against migration issues but also security issues, poverty, and agriculture, and other types of issues. Last 2 years ago, we actually did a hackathon in Abidjan to actually see how we can stop waste from coming into waters, into the waters, because it leads to it's the rivers, and then it goes from the rivers to the ocean, and so on and so forth. So we have launched that hackathon where we have mobilized some startups that are actually being incubated right now to develop solutions, satellite solutions, to actually see where the waste comes from to go into the waters. And then we have, with the support of Badea, we are incubating those startups now to see how innovation can be a solution, because innovation as well is quite a very good solution. So for us, for Bewade, the blue economy is actually a very good solution to mobilize those additional resources that can come and support. And believe it or not, we have developed infrastructure projects where when you're developing a road, for example, the system, the drainage system that you put around it, you can actually have create a blue bond solution around that. And then we are actually working right now on the pipeline with Guinea-Bissau, Senegal, Togo, and Benin to see how we can develop infrastructure using blue economy to mobilize blue bonds to finance those projects. So we are working with the regional regulator to see how the taxonomy can be developed to help us mobilize and do that bond. So hopefully by the end of the second trimester of this year, we'll be able to finalize the framework that we're developing with the support of BNP Paribas, and to see how we can launch that. So this is in a nutshell what I can say that Bewade is doing in this area, and also looking at how we can build partnerships with other institutions like OECD, like CAF, whoever is doing other activities, and see how we can also learn from their experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mubarak, and it's very clear from all of you. Yes, indeed, ocean finance starts inland, and from what you say, indeed, we need also to agree until when, how up into the inland, and make sure that indeed when we are tracking, when we are discussing on these blue bonds, all these new tools that we can indeed develop, we make it as much as possible with a consistent view of what's behind. I think it's going to only strengthen the appetite of the investors for the type of tools that you are referring to. And thank you also for bringing the carbon markets, knowing that all of us, we are conscious of the importance of having carbon markets which play a good role in terms of sustainability, not only for carbon, but also for biodiversity, notably. I'll turn to Alicia to have your vision, of course, of what's happening in Latin America. I know that you have done also a lot on this topic and developed some innovations. Please, Alicia.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the exposition that has made Shabbat. It has been very useful for us to organize our ideas. We have been working, as Mubarak said also, in Latin America and the Caribbean region in blue economy, sustainable blue economy, but it's important that we all really are able to develop joint taxonomies to identify what are we talking about, because sometimes it's very difficult to really define what is blue economy, ocean economy, and we are still in this process. Also, to provide a context, you know that CAF is a regional development bank, 23 countries for the Latin American and Caribbean region. We always like to say that the countries are our shareholders and also our clients. So we have this idea that the empowerment of the countries is very important for us, and we also need to follow what they really need. So we have identified that blue economy is, of course, very important for the region, not only South America and Central America, but also for the Caribbean countries. And we made this commitment in Lisbon 3 years ago. We committed $1.25 billion in blue economy projects. I can confirm that closing in 2024, we are around $900 million, which is very important for us. We really feel very happy. But then I need to further develop this idea, because we are still working in the taxonomies. We have, of course, in the green projects, we follow the IDFC common guidelines, and we have developed one blue taxonomy, which is part of this green taxonomy. What we have done is that every project that is qualified as blue has to have at least one part of green project, but it's not 100% of the project needs to be green, because then we could not make harbors, infrastructures, renewable energy. So we are working with this taxonomy, and we consider it can be very useful for everyone. Of course, we would be very happy to discuss, because this was approved in September last year. So we are working with that. So also, what we are also trying to do is to innovate in the kind of instruments we are using. We want to really bring Latin American and Caribbean region into the whole discussion of blue and ocean economy. We consider that the countries do not feel themselves very much involved in this kind of projects, and they cannot identify what is a blue project. It's very difficult, so we need to work with them very much. We have some credit operations that we have qualified as blue, including coastal erosion adaptation in Trinidad and Tobago, projects in the shrimp farming factory in Ecuador, many projects to prevent marine pollution, as Mubarak was commenting. But we feel especially proud of one thing that we are now working on, which is the biodiversity credits in the Patagonia. It's not carbon markets, but biodiversity credits. This is very innovative. We are now working in the methodologies, in the baseline. So I think this could be very interesting for all of us to really learn what is this about. Also, I would like to stress that we are working on a sustainable blue economy strategy that we are planning to present in Nice. And in this area, we are working in the 4 areas you have mentioned: financing, partnerships, capacity building, and one important thing, which is local value. It is important for us that the countries understand that blue economy is not something very abstract, but this really implies improving the quality of lives of people, depending on fisheries, tourism, wetlands, everything that you could consider important for their economies. They need to find the interest on that. So, of course, for us, the strategic alliances are very important. Not only, you already know, the Eastern Tropical Pacific Marine Corridor, the CEMAR, which is very important, but also we are part of the Mangrove Breakthrough Initiative, and we are now member of the Blue Economy and Finance Forum. We are working with ORA too. So I think that this part is very important in our strategy, the alliances. So summing up, we consider that we need to develop it to be aligned in the definition of blue economy, but we feel happy that we have this definition. It's very useful for us, and we have made important progress, but we need to work further, and we are looking forward to the works of a coalition. So thank you very much, and happy to share with you our experience.
Thank you very much, Alicia. And I mean, I think just to make sure everybody understands how important to hear the fact that you're bringing, of course, attention to the blue economy, but immediately bringing in the green. This is, in fact, what is new in this area, in a way, because, of course, we're all doing infrastructure, and we're all doing infrastructure in these parts. And so the question is really how to try to have a more sustainable vision of the action. And I remember, of course, your point on better targeting, which comes with it, also to make sure of the positive impact that we are doing. We are supporting the development of the economy, but at the same time, we have to be cautious on the vulnerabilities of the places where and countries where we are working. And thank you, of course, also. It shows how much all of us, we are active. Maybe we don't track enough or well enough, and we also need to structure better how we are doing, also to improve in and to have to feed each other with our past experiences. Before leaving the floor to the other panelists, I will of course welcome Dr. Jean Leon, Executive Director of the recently created Development Bank for Resilient Prosperity and former President of the Caribbean Development Bank. So of course, this topic of ocean finance and is very important for you. So we would be really pleased to have you not setting the scene because we have started, but giving your view of this topic.
Thank you very much, and apologies for not being there at the beginning. I was at the executive committee session that was just taking place. So let me begin by saying it is a privilege today to discuss a subject that I think is foundational to our shared prosperity, that is the ocean. The ocean is not just a vast expanse of water. It is the beating heart of our planet, shaping economies, regulating the climate, and sustaining life. Yet, despite its significance, it remains one of the least financed sectors of sustainable development. This is not just an environmental issue. It is an economic imperative, a development challenge, and a call for systemic change, one that recognizes the interdependencies between the ocean and the boundaries that keep the planet stable, that aligns finance with ecological stability and redefines prosperity as resilience. The ocean underpins the livelihoods of over 3 billion people, contributes trillions of dollars to the global economy, and provides essential climate regulation services. But in many coastal economies, ocean degradation threatens fisheries, tourism, and trade, sectors that we all aware are lifelines for small island developing states and low-lying coastal states. But beyond the economics, the ocean is also a climate stabilizer. It absorbs nearly 30% of global CO2 emissions, mitigates heat stress, and supports the planet's water cycle. Yet, despite its critical role, we are undermining this natural infrastructure through pollution, overfishing, and climate change. So ocean health is not just about marine conservation. It is about land use policies, freshwater management, and atmospheric stability. Because when forests are cut down, excess nitrogen and phosphorus from agriculture wash into rivers and eventually into the ocean, fueling dead zones. When fossil fuel emissions rise, ocean acidification intensifies, threatening coral reefs and marine biodiversity. And when biodiversity loss on land escalates, it weakens ecosystems that support coastal and marine species. So therefore, these are not separate crises. They are part of the same system. Equally, when ocean health declines, the consequences are system-wide. Fisheries collapse, threatening food security. Rising sea levels displace coastal populations, creating migration crises. And ocean acidification destroys marine ecosystems, which weakens carbon sequestration. So building ocean resilience is about stabilizing the planet, keeping it habitable. So if we fail to address the ocean crisis within this broader planetary context that I have just outlined, we risk treating symptoms rather than the causes. And so I have two questions I'd like to ask. The first is, who better to execute that mandate than the system of public development banks working in concert? And an item we just raised a minute ago in the communique that's likely to be out. It is a new partnership that should be focused on outcomes and based on coherence of purpose of national development banks. Indeed, I would argue a new partnership for reforming the global financial architecture from the bottom up. By aligning financial flows with global climate, biodiversity, and resilience objectives, public development banks can make ecological stability its financing the epicenter of incentives design, penalizing the stressors that create planet instability and rewarding nature-positive buffers. That ought to be the framework of incentives to drive finance for whether it's ocean or the broader planet stability. Despite contributing trillions, as I've said, to the economy, ocean conservation receives less than 3% of global climate finance. So to be able to close that gap, public development banks should be working on promoting blended finance structures to crowd in private capital through use of credit guarantees and concessional finance. We should be supporting nature-backed financial instruments like blue bonds, allowing nations to finance large-scale marine restoration. And third, we should be investing in blue infrastructure, such as sustainable ports, aquaculture, and ocean-based renewables. That's the role of PDBs in that space. The second question is, what better medium to do so than embracing blue natural capital? That is the wealth stored in our marine ecosystems. Now, here's the beauty of that. By leveraging the ocean's ability to generate sustainable economic value, blue natural capital markets can enhance ecological resilience. So by monetizing marine ecosystem services, whether it is through blue carbon credits, biodiversity credits, or payments for ecosystem services, blue capital markets can align financial incentives with conservation. So through natural asset-backed financing, we can therefore transform conservation into bankable investment and thereby attract institutional investors and, I dare say, sovereign wealth funds. So if this is done in an equitable way, based on science, and is verifiable, then blue natural capital can spur an ocean economy that rewards stewardship, builds resilience, and at the same time fosters planetary stability. That means we need to do at least 3 things to make this happen. Establish clear property rights over marine resources. That's to generate market stability. We need to embrace the use of artificial intelligence and blockchain-based monitoring, reporting, and verification to gain market credibility. And the third, we need to adopt now governance models that benefit local communities so that they become genuine stewards of what we are trying to do. So, colleagues, we stand today at a turning point. We can continue down a path where the ocean is degraded, where economies suffer, and where communities are left vulnerable. Or we can forge a new path, one where finance serves the ocean and the ocean sustains humanity. The answer for me is clear. We need to shift from economies based on extraction to regenerative economies where conservation and restoration are prominent. We need to move from fragmented policies to system-wide solutions because, as I pointed out, everything is linked. And third, we need to move from short-term profits to long-term resilience, change the entire incentive system on which we operate. So with that, these are the remarks I wanted to make at the beginning, and I wasn't able to. And I'm happy to continue
but
the discussion.
In the middle, it's fine, I think. Thank you very much. No, thank you very much. And indeed, I think your putting back some new dynamic into the discussion. The ambition and the need is really clear. It's such a program that you have prepared for us, and I guess we'll have a new member for the coalition with you, I'm sure, because we completely share your views on all this topic. I'm now turning to you, Tomoyuki Kimura, just to share your own experience on the Asia-Pacific region. We see we have a very nice mix here of presentation and maybe also react on some of the points made by Dr. Jinlei, and notably on innovation. Very striking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for inviting ADB to this meeting. Unfortunately, our ocean team could not make it here, but on behalf of ADB, first of all, I'm very happy to reaffirm our commitment to the coalition, and we're all very excited and looking forward to working on the roadmap toward the UN conference later this year. So we have actually initiated in our region the number of innovative financing mechanism for ocean and blue finance. First of all, the blue bonds. ADB issued its first blue bond back in 2021, and thereafter we set up a blue bond incubator to support the private sector entities and then the governments to issue blue bonds. So work under this incubator actually will develop a standardized global guidance for the issuance of blue bonds. We're working on this in collaboration with International Capital Market Association, IFC, United Nations Environment Program Finance Initiative, and also United Nations Global Compact. We have been also very active in the area of blended financing. We launched in 2019 ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility. We call it ACGF, to accelerate green infrastructure investment in Southeast Asia. So this is a unique mechanism actually owned by the finance ministries of the 10 ASEAN countries and also ADB. And the co-financing partner include AFD from France, European Investment Bank, European Union, KfW Germany, and the Republic of Korea. So this facility provides ASEAN member government with technical assistance and also access to over $1 billion loan financing from co-financing partners. Technical assistance supports the government to identify and then prepare commercially viable green infrastructure project, while the loan covers the upfront, the capital investment cost. So this is a two-pronged approach, help de-risk the green infrastructure project, make it more attractive to private capital investors. Another example is our Ocean and Coastal Resilience Adaptation Trust Funds. This was established in 2023 to increase the quantity and quality of investment in ocean health. It's currently supported by Nordic Development Funds and then FCDO of UK with a total of $13 million. We have successfully leveraged $10 in additional funding for $1 invested by these trust funds. Another area we're actively looking at is debt for nature swap. We have laid the groundwork to support some governments in the region with structuring commercial debt for nature swaps. And as all of you know, this debt for nature swap have played a very important role in mobilizing, the resources for ocean conservation, particularly in Latin America. So we are actually planning to replicate that success in our regions. So lessons we have learned, and this also relates to the three obstacles that Shawat from OECD mentioned at the beginning. So the blue finance, ocean finance, and more broadly speaking, any particularly infrastructure investment contributing to climate adaptation, we really need to incentivize. We really need to motivate the government to make an investment, because normally this type of investment takes longer, cost more, okay? So what are incentives? Of course, financial incentives is very important, particularly concessional funding, like grant money. But that is not enough. There is also, equally importantly, the non-financial incentive needs to be there, which is actually a policy dialogue that the upstream to convince the government to prioritize those investments. Because in many developing countries, based on my own experience and ADB's experience, always finance minister, planning minister, they're under the pressure to start a project, complete a project as soon as possible for political reason or whatever. So we need to have a very in-depth, robust policy dialogue to convince them based on some objective diagnostics, and then motivate them to make such investment. So in this regard, I think the partnership between National Development Bank, who actually knows the policy and the regulatory and the political economy of the country, and then MDB like ADB, who could have better perhaps leverage to the government, could be a very good opportunity to bring this forward. Another point also relates to the second obstacle Charlotte mentioned. So the challenge in developing pipeline, project pipeline, and then preparing the project. In this, ADB recently developed AI-based project assessment tool. So we actually, we call it a green financing digital platform. So this, using the AI technology, we basically intends to replace, I would say, 80% of a project preparation or due diligence work, which human do. So this will help government substantially decrease the cost of project preparation and also shorten the time for project preparation. So I think there's a huge opportunity to utilize this digital technology to help mobilize more funds for green finance and ocean financing. I'm actually going to be the panelist of the AI and digital session tomorrow afternoon, so if you're interested, please come. Thank you.
We are. I'm sure we are all interested. 80% of the due diligence work is too big to be, but maybe there will be follow-up questions in all this. Let me turn to Ariane Stensmeyer from Aura. You're a coalition bringing various stakeholders within this work that you are doing. From your point of view, especially stakeholders from the private side, which we hear a group of public banks, but of course, as you heard, with the intention of leveraging and mobilizing the private sector and supporting private sector in what they can do best in terms of ocean finance. So what would be your advice for us as PDBs to work together with the civil society and also with the private sector more efficiently? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite, and also congratulations to the 11 members, and maybe now 12, to the great progress being made. Yeah, as an alliance, we are also an alliance of sort of the willing, as you mentioned, and so we are now an alliance of more than 120 members, many of which are in this room. So I just wanted to give some examples what we were able to achieve in the last 5 years. As an alliance, you know, we have in our title also action, so we really wanted to make sure that this is an active alliance where we understood that, first of all, we need to speak a common language if we want to bring together the different stakeholders. So in our alliance, we have the public banks, the private banks, insurance companies, science to provide the data, as well as NGOs and governments. And so through that, we were able to really bring an alliance together to work on specific projects and collaborate. And I will give some examples. I want to just build quickly on some of the scene setting as well, that it's really good to see that we're now talking not only about sustainable blue economy, but really, you mentioned that as well, the regenerative blue economy. And I think thinking that through is something new, which we need to align, obviously, with the biodiversity framework and the climate change framework. And so this is why I was glad to hear also this morning in the opening session the link to the climate change COP and biodiversity framework as well. Yesterday, and thank you, Vincent, also hosting the session around UNOC at Ocean X. I think your colleague from the French embassy mentioned that if the blue economy would be a state, it would be the 7th largest economy globally and would be part of the G7. And I think that's underlining some of the numbers you just met. one of the barriers, I think, which hasn't been mentioned is really access to finance. And so I just wanted to add that to the discussion, and we'll come back to some of the initiatives we are doing as that. So Aura in itself sort of is, as I mentioned, sort of our main goal is to bring the members together to really bring new innovative financial or insurance tools to the table. So over the last 5 years, we have been building a pipeline of 60 projects, which always has it at its heart scalable financial or insurance products, and that has been really the innovation we will be able to fostering through the partnership. One example with the Inter-American Development Bank was actually to build an economic study around the Mesoamerican Reef to understand what is the potential economic value, to then be able to work with an insurance broker, a member of ours, WTW, and some other partners in the Mesoamerican Reef regions, the MA Fund, to think about what could be a parametric insurance product, for example. So that was one of the initiatives we initiated over the last 3 years, and now have tested and piloted parametric insurance in the MAR region in more than 3 project areas, and now scaling it to 12, and are thinking about how do we scale it sort of globally as well. And some lessons learned is really to bring these different perspectives to the table early on. And I think some of you mentioned that as well. It's around bringing trust to the new nascent blue economy space. And you do this with having everyone at the table from the beginning and brainstorming together. And that's how sort of the innovation is created. One of the lessons learned we also wanted to highlight is that some of the financial innovations doesn't necessarily have to be new. It can also be how can we learn from the green, and you mentioned that, Alicia, as well, from the green space or climate space. Blue bonds has been mentioning. So climate bonds and green bonds are already functioning. So how can we bring that to the blue bond space? Guarantees is a financial tool, which is really important to de-risking the space, especially the blue economy space, which is quite nascent. So how can we learn and bring guarantees to the blue space? One of the challenges we also find is like, how do we finance the missing middle? So once we have identified the project pipeline and have some smaller scale innovations, some local businesses who now needs to scale, but they're not big enough yet, so where sort of blue bonds or other larger scale mechanisms can really help them to scale. So how do we bridge that missing middle? And that is through policy and trying to get especially also national banks or pension funds more interested into the national blue economy, and that's again where guarantees play a significant role. But how do we also create impact funds who are willing and taking the risk in investing into the smaller scale businesses in the blue economy? I think therefore also data is important, and I just want to mention also an initiative we have been doing together with some of our university partners in AXA Climate, which is the Coastal Risk Index. So it's again a tool where coastal communities and governments and as well as asset owners at coastal community level can really identify the risk being threatened sort of to their assets, and how do you plan forward. So the Coastal Risk Index can help you to understand how would you invest into green infrastructure, and we just mentioning that is an area where also the public banks play a significant role. So how can you really ensure to build most coastal infrastructure with a green-gray sort of mix, or blue infrastructure if you like, to then de-risk some of the threats we will see in the future. Last but not least, I think a lot of the recommendations has been met what the public development banks can do. I think one thing to underline is really how do you are able to build sort of the trust into the market. And with that sort of building, you mentioned that also from ADB, sort of the idea of an accelerator. So how can you also really share your lessons learned and then sit together with the public and private banks to then think about what are these common metrics? And that is something which is Aura's looking into ahead of the Blue Economy Finance Forum. So we really want to build that discussion as well. We have an initiative called Back Blue with the WEF and some other partners where we are bringing together the private banks around the table to commit to investing into the sustainable and regenerative blue economy by sort of underlining their commitment towards the UNEP-FI, sustainable blue economy goals, but also how do you account for the investments being made by working with TNFD, for example. So these are some areas where I think public and private banks can continue to grow and collaborate, and where Aura is more than happy to help. And I think the Blue Economy Finance Forum, I think some of you mentioned it already, is really the time where we want to shift the way we're thinking about investing into the blue economy, not as there's a gap, but actually there's an ocean of investable opportunities, and we all need to come together and shift the way we are investing into these. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ariane. I think, from all these discussions, it's quite clear. Ocean finance, it's climate and nature finance all together. It's a question of better focusing. It's a policy question. It's a question of dialogue in countries, so that indeed we are mandated more clearly, maybe, to do this with to do this at scale. We also hear so many experiences, and this is really the spirit of this coalition: is that to be more efficient, to be faster, sharing experiences is certainly very useful. This is what we experience in so many coalitions, like the International Development Finance Club that you referred to, Alicia, notably. So really, thank you for all that, and thank you indeed for your proposal also to collaborate with you and with the work that you are doing with the private banks, because of course our idea is not to work in between PDBs only. It's always to work with the government countries, with communities, and with the private sector, as you said. Maybe I'll open the floor for reactions from the panelists first, and then from the audience around your expectations or reaction to what the panelists have said, expectation with regard to the coalition, expectation with regard to the work of the PDBs. I don't know, maybe Jean, you wanted to start, please.
Thank you. I may say something that's already been said, so with apologies to begin with. But three words I heard that resonate or stuck with me. One is incentives. Two, I think, is risk. And the third is outcomes. So let me just say what I mean by those. Incentives are what's going to help drive the emergence of what's now nascent into becoming full-blown markets. And I don't think it's going to be through regulation. The key, I believe, is we need to remap how we look at risk and return. Risk from the one perspective, I think, has been measured wrong. We adopt too short a horizon and too narrow or partial a perspective. And so our risk is always overblown because we do not take feedback loops of the benefits of what we are doing into account. And therefore, our whole investor pool is blindsided by what they think is risk, and that perception needs to be changed. So there's an education issue, there's an advocacy issue. We need to address that. So that's the first. The second, and that's linked to this, is when we say return, and therefore the internal rate of return, we've also been using a wrong measure. I say we because economists, financiers, we are all guilty. We've been using a wrong measure of total cost. Total cost from the beginning of time, as we measure theory of value, is really the cost of inputs. And we relegate to the side externalities. What we do know is what starts as a land issue problem becomes an ocean problem, becomes an atmospheric problem, becomes a biodiversity problem, it becomes a whole planet problem. So you cannot ignore the cost of what you do. So even while we are talking about ocean and ocean health, you cannot divorce that from the land issues that are actually infusing and getting the oceans sick. And so total cost needs to be the new metric we need to all work on, your common language, Ariane. How do we measure cost? And if you measure cost correctly, what you will find is the return on something that is now high because the cost is very low becomes super bad because the cost is much higher in a total sense, and consequently the incentive for an investor to want to look into that now has to be reversed and will be reversed. So incentives takes care of itself if the risk, the return for the total cost is brought on board. So I think when we talk of coalition, these are some of the things the coalition should be thinking a little about. How do we, I mean, we need to keep doing what we are doing. We cannot stop. But we need to be working on the margins now. How do we change the thinking? How do we change the paradigm? Because if not, we don't solve our problem. So I'd like to put this on the table, a longer-term agenda, but through a coalition, all minds together working in concert. Because it has to be in concert. It's not just a partnership, not just a coalition. We need to be working in concert and working in concert towards an outcome, not about institutions. We lose that point also. It becomes AFD, CAF, AURA, BOAD, DBRP. No, we are not in this for ourselves. It's the outcomes that matter. So our entire coalition efforts ought to be how do we work together towards an outcome, not to the benefit of our institutions. So coherence of partnerships is very, very important. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Alicia, you wanted to react, obviously, so please go ahead.
No, thank you very much. It has been really interesting to listen to my colleagues and especially Mr. Leon. Talking about coalitions, I would like to share one concern. How can we promote not coalition only among the institutions, but in countries, the countries themselves? Because, for instance, now we are working hard in the Sargassum project in the Caribbean region, and we see that it is very difficult to promote actions for the countries working together. Even though this is, of course, a regional problem, but sometimes it's really very difficult to work from the institutions country by country. We need to work from a regional point of view. And talking about incentives, sometimes it's very difficult how to make the attribution of the incentives among the countries. And this also has to do, and this could be my second point, how to reinforce governance within countries, because we know that ocean is not a very specific sector in the public accounting. So how can we make possible that the countries have an accounting for these institutions, how to prepare sustainability ocean plans or any other instrument that really make the institutions work together within the countries. So I would say that these are for us the two challenges: working together with countries and also the governance within the countries.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Any other reaction from the panels? And then I will leave the floor to you, of course. Please,
thank you very much. I just wanted to reinforce the partnership coherence that you mentioned, which I believe is really important. And when you look at what has been done, even for the JETP, for example, even what the NDCP is doing to bring all the stakeholders together, to have a country platform scheme where we know for sure what the countries need, and then in front we can link to the partners that are around the table that can finance what, and so on and so forth. So I think even in this architecture as well, we need to have that kind of scheme and make sure that we bring all partners together. Because when you look at it in real, sometimes you have some people that finance feasibility studies, but we don't know. Some finance implementation, some finance, and so on. So we need to bring all the stakeholders together and make sure that there is a real coherence between the partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you. Coordination and at the country level, yes, indeed, there is no country platform on oceans. It's missing. Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Just I'd like to add a couple of points to this importance of coalition, or maybe opportunity. So, like I said, in terms of the policy coherence, in terms of motivating government to make an investment, I think there will be an excellent opportunity for coalition between particularly MDB and the DFI and the National Development Bank. I really would like to emphasize that. Number two, MDB and DFI, we can actually provide more sophisticated, innovative financing too, but oftentimes financing ocean or blue project, the challenge is local currency, so the foreign exchange risk. So National Development Bank definitely in a much better position to provide the local financing. So there will be a good opportunity for synergy between us. And then lastly, in terms of outcome, although I'm not really an ocean finance expert, but I understand that one of the challenges is the taxonomy. We need to have a shared methodology definition to measure our outcome. So this is something perhaps I think we'll be looking at in the process of developing a roadmap, I guess. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Taxonomy, because it's important for us to measure our use of proceeds. But I take your points also. You really talk to bankers, as you are one, when you talk indeed about risk and measuring maybe differently also the returns, incorporating better the externalities. These are tools that we all have when we do our own assessment. Maybe we should look at how we do it, especially with this vision about the ocean topics, and just let's reconfirm whether or not we properly account for these externalities related to the ocean. We're used to do it on environment, but are we specifically, sufficiently specific on the ocean ecosystems? That's a really relevant. Thank you very much. There have been a lot of hands, many hands. Shashwat and so please, Shashwat and then the rest.
No, I'll be very quick because I was noticing a theme as we were talking about kind of coherence, regional level, national level. But I mean, it's quite clear we're in the ocean space. There's a need for a very multi-level layer of governance. So local communities that have traditional indigenous knowledge, the national level that have, or subnational level as well, community level, especially when you consider different land tenure. You're talking national level with development planning, ocean strategies, regional level because the ocean is a transnational resource, and at the regional level is when you really have some of the common pool resources that kind of transcend national boundaries, and then the global level because that's where the rules of the game is often set. And I think one thing that's kind of somewhat missing to date is how do we blend all of that together, and PDBs and even bilateral aid agencies through capacity development activities can really make sure that, for example, you have local actors participate in negotiations at the global level. And I think really thinking through some of those very practical and concrete solutions is quite important. And so I just wanted to reiterate that because I was seeing that theme play out. And just a second point quickly in terms of outcomes. I think for climate, we have a very good measure of greenhouse gas emissions, carbon dioxide equivalent, but for biodiversity, we don't. And the ocean is in many ways a product of both. And I think what's happening in the ocean space is science is also advancing. So science is coming up with better ways of measuring biodiversity outcomes. And I think bridging the science socioeconomic interface is essential, and I think that's something that we need to do at UNOC and beyond. So that's maybe just two quick reflections.
Thank you. So I leave the floor to the room before, because Vincent, I don't forget you're here as well. You'll do the closing. I had Mr. Leon to kickstart and put some more dynamic, but you'll do the closing. This is how I count on you. So please introduce yourself when you take the mic and switch on your mic, elsewise nobody will hear you from the live stream, please.
Thank you. So I'm David Albertani. I'm the CEO of Catalytic Finance Foundation, and we do work on ocean. So first with Bloomberg Philanthropies, we do investment in port decarbonization, and also with the UN on the Global Fund for Coral Reef. And I just wanted to your point, Mr. Jean Leon, speak about a new initiative that has been born called One Ocean, which under the lead of UNCDF, UNEP, and UNDP. And we are part of the implementing agency. And the goal is to see how such new coalition at, let's say, UN level could exist. And there is a work currently happening at the stakeholder engagement with private sector, MDBs, DFIs, PDBs, to see, towards UNOC 3, how such a coalition of the willing for a new, global agency with a UN, hat could, lead the way to basically exist at UNOC 3. And, this is also, let's say a call for action, but, of course, the ambition is large. The UN also has, to the point of Mr. Jean Leon, there are a lot of levy that we can still activate that hasn't been activated yet, speaking about, shipping, ecotourism, subsea cable. And so these discussions are being started, and also, inviting, whomever is willing. We are hosting a series of events towards UNOC 3 under the leadership of UN. Next one, the first workshop will be at Our Ocean in Busan. So whomever is interested, this coalition is starting, and happy to discuss that and to invite you at Our Ocean to really discuss the nitty-gritty, so that basically at UNOC 3 we can be under in a position where with the UN to launch formally a facility. Of course, that will take us to UNOC 4, I guess, to really start to be operational. But the level of ambition is there, and happy to discuss with all of you about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Please, you had raised your hand as well. Yeah.
Thank you to the panelists. That was really wonderful, very, very, very interesting. My name is Diana Barraclough, and I work in the United Nations Trade and Development, and I have a long interest in the oceans economy. My first question is directed to my colleague from the OECD, Shashwat. As always, and I tell you this every time we are ever in the same room, I really loved the work that you're doing on the ODA, and I think it's absolutely essential that nobody else is doing work like this, and it's very, very important. I wondered if you could dare to tell us a bit, how do you see future trends? I think it's a big concern for all of us, what's going to happen with the ODA in general looking forward, and especially given the challenges and really the paltry amount that's going into the oceans. I'm very struck by your figure that, I think, what did you say, less than 0.8%. 0.8% of what was already a very small number is going to sustainable oceans. So we're talking maybe $1 billion. Well, UNCTAD data says that trade, oceans-related trade last year was $2 trillion. Okay, that's services and goods. But out of $2 trillion supported on this assumption that we have clean and healthy oceans, which is getting not the funds that they need. So related to this question, the concerns about ODA in the future, do you see any policy space or appetite for also seeking new sources? And that really echoes the point of the speaker just before me. Is it time to maybe galvanize some more consensus behind levies? Can we have a tourism levy or a shipping levy, as well as the ODA? Then the second question is really to all the speakers. We hear a lot about risk reduction, and that governments need to guarantee banks, or that governments need to somehow take on board the risk that the private sector is not able or not willing to take. I would like to ask a sort of different question, which is that risk, or can risk be reduced by having coherent development policies and maybe industrial policies that create a demand? So, government funds could be used to help finance the demand rather than to carry the burden of the risk. And what do you need as a bank? What do you need to see from the governments in your country or your region that would help, make that happen? Like, where's that gap between looking for the demand for the users or the revenue from your project? How can that be underwritten, not by government just taking the financial risk, but by government helping create a revenue source? Thank you very much. Sorry, it's a long question.
Thank you. Answering this question may take a bit longer than the few minutes we have left. So what I suggest in any case is that we take a few questions, a round of questions, elsewise we may be out of time. So there was a hand here, and I see one here, and behind. So those three hands. Thank you.
Yes, hello. My name is Hubert Strauss. It's a statement more than a question. So I'm a lead economist for regional development at the European Investment Bank's Projects Directorate, and like Tomoyuki, I'm not a blue economy specialist myself. My main topic is just transition. That's why I'm here. But a lot of the discussion that I heard in finding a common classification and finding common outcomes really reminds me the work we are doing with the other MDBs on measuring just transition outcomes. It was said that for some areas it's easier, mitigation, how much carbon emissions have you cut. For your area and for the just transition area, it's much more complicated. So I'm speaking here on behalf of Franck Jésus, our blue economist specialist, and since the EIB is a big player in the worldwide sustainable development finance, I'd like to give you a bit of a perspective of how we are supporting the blue economy. We fully support the Sustainable Oceans roadmap, and we are already have been contributing to 2 of the 3 value-added activities that you are proposing, that is finance and advisory, understood as technical and financial support for concrete project preparation and implementation. So first, what do we understand by blue economy? It's a very broad understanding, and some will not like it after what I've heard, but I will nuance it. First, it comprises marine-based activities, for example, sustainable fisheries and agriculture, sustainable maritime transport, coastal resilience, maritime renewable energy. It's half of our portfolio in blue economy. Second, marine-related activities such as sustainable seafood processing, ocean monitoring, shipbuilding and repair, which is not always all green, as we know. Third, pollution-reducing investments, notably waste and wastewater management. And fourth, coastal protection, of course, with a preference for nature-based flood protection measures and stormwater management in infrastructure, which I think it's becoming increasingly important. There is a strong synergy between our blue economy lending and what we call climate action and environmental sustainability. Some of you might know our EIB Climate Bank Roadmap 2025, which vows to have at least 50% of our total lending contributing directly to climate action and environmental sustainability. This measurement framework is externally audited. It's very strict. And I can tell you that 86% of our blue economy lending contributes to climate action and or environmental sustainability, which means that our blue economy lending is mostly already green. And here I would like to echo what you said and praise you for what you said. It's our contribution as public development banks is as much about what we stop doing as what we continue doing. So we like to talk about the good things we are doing, and I have a long list of project examples, but I see you want to cut me and I will stop soon. And this is why we should not forget this point. With the Climate Bank Roadmap and our alignment on the EU taxonomy with the 6 areas of climate action and environmental sustainability, this forced us to stop doing many things we did before, including gas-fired power plants, for example. And I think this is where we need to take the lead over the rest of the financial sector. One final word on internal rate of return. The EIB in its infrastructure project has an economic rate of return framework that prices in externalities to the extent we are able to. And our best example is the economic testing for road infrastructure, where we include into the total cost the additional carbon emissions that a new highway will create over its life, the 50 years it holds. And by doing this, we basically kill all of the Western European highway projects that are brought to our that are asking for our financing, because these projects no longer survive the enhanced economic testing. So in a way, we are very proud of having, but it took 2 years to work with consultants, because the trick is to incorporate a Paris-aligned carbon price into the externalities, into the total cost. And carbon-aligned carbon price is on a path that goes up to 1,200 US dollars per ton of CO2. So a wonderful panel, and thank you for these great insights, which resonates a lot with our thinking on blue economy and beyond. And we are looking forward to the next steps, not me, but Frank, in helping to, because our main questions should be, we are already doing a lot in the area. We have financed more than 10 billion in 5 years for projects worth 43 billion, but that we can do alone. So we have to see what we can do better together and where we add value by cooperating, be it because some projects are too risky or too large, so we need to structure them and to join the financing, or some are to have too many knowledge gaps.
I really want to cut you.
Fill them.
Thank you. No, thank you for your word of support and for all these examples. I don't want myself to spend too much time doing the recap, so I leave the floor to the two more questions before Vincent, having you with the science view on this topic. Yes, please.
Thank you, and thanks to the panelists. I'm Nassim Ulman. I'm leading the work on green economy and blue economy at the UN Economic Commission for Africa. And in fact, it's not a question, it's more a comment. And I would like really to build on particularly what Shashwat was saying about the challenges, particularly in the context of African economies. And again, underlining the importance of the regional actors, as Mubarak has highlighted, and by giving a very concrete example of the risks, related to the risks, and particularly in the blue economy landscape. When you issue blue bonds or you restructure your debt for ocean swaps, when you are a small African economy, you are taking a very important risk because you have KPIs that are related to these operations. And if, in case of non-compliance with the KPIs, in an area where the blue economy, your jurisdiction is really at the border with other jurisdiction or with non-jurisdiction, means your KPIs are more sensitive to exogenous shocks. So the risk is that you then end up with paying higher interest than the one you are expecting to pay. And you end up with having a bigger debt at the end of the day. So this is a very important risk. That's why regional actors are key here to support, to provide, of course, the technical support, the coordination, and as highlighted by, I think, Alicia, on the importance of cooperation between countries, particularly on the blue economy, to reduce that exogenous shocks, potential shocks that will affect the KPIs is key. It was just to highlight that point. Thanks.
Thank you. It's certainly a real specificity of this topic. Please, would you like to use my mic?
It's okay, I will stand up. I will try to talk louder. So I'm Salima from Cap Business, Indian Ocean region. So the name itself says we are working with regards to Indian Ocean. And what we do is like we are accompanying the private sector in a just and resilient transition. And one of the priority areas is the blue economy. So my question is also, we heard from PDBs, we heard about the beneficiaries, but also what is your perspective, or what is the role that you see of implementing partners in supporting PDBs in advancing sustainable ocean-related activities?
Thank you. Who wants to start answering? Shashwat, you had the specific questions, but I think for some of us, it's 5 more minutes. Is it possible, or it's? I don't think there's a side event immediately. No, we have to cut. Okay. So let me first invite all of you who can and who are available to join us for another part of the discussion, including with the OECD colleagues on Friday morning. If I'm not mistaken, Adria, if you can just confirm the place and timing. I have 5 more minutes. Thank you, and we'll try to continue the discussion and indeed be also concrete in trying to identify how to progress with other partners, not only PDBs. We have 1 or 2 minutes before handing the floor to Vincent to answer some of the questions, and then I'll hand it over to Vincent to close. Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Diana, for those first kind words and a great question. I'll be very quick on ODA. I think the prognosis is probably not good. We see ODA is increasing every year, but that's mostly been for in-donor refugee costs or reconstruction of conflicts, and which is where we probably will expect the growth of ODA, which means the growing priorities in the ocean space, unless there is a rapid kind of a political momentum, it's not something maybe we expect. But that really strengthens the point about targeting and really thinking carefully about where we use ODA. So this means for activities with no, in at least the medium term, no viable positive return. So conservation. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be financing debt for nature swaps or any other instruments, but thinking really carefully about where those instruments might be viable. So the use case matters a lot. And then there's a broader question of the broader financial architecture. So solidarity levies, ending harmful subsidies, those things are equally important. And I think in some ways that falls outside my remit within the OECD Development Assistance Committee. But I think that's something that, collectively as PDBs and our counterparts in different parts of the House, we really need to put forward and make that a viable agenda and not just something that's talked about in the margins. So I'm personally in favor. I think it's something that we need to build consensus on.
Thank you. I think indeed additional resources is something we all need. Our work also as PDB is to work on the channels once there is this additional funding, and this is what we are trying to do with the coalitions. I don't know if you have a very quick last point, Ariane, and then Vincent. Yes.
Yeah, just on the question also on the levy. So what we have been working on also with some of our partners like Howden is to understand what is the potential of all the ocean-based sectors and sort of the insurance premiums they're paying, and therefore sort of thinking about sort of using part of it to establish a 30 by 30 risk and resilience fund, which can contribute both to the sustainable blue economy agenda, but also to some of the 30 by 30 challenges. So I just want to mention that. I think I just want to reiterate that the Blue Economy Finance Forum just before UNOC is a really important, we hope at least, a turning point to really shift the discussion around financing the blue economy. So I really do hope that this coalition of the willing is coming together with a strong message. I think you have a clear mandate now to work on some of the challenges we just discussed. And what we as ORA have been doing is over the past years with some of our members also to try to understand what are these key cornerstones of building a capital market for the ocean. I would just mention guarantees, impact funds, the 30 by 30 fund and others. So there are enough initiatives out there to either sort of ramp up existing finance and initiatives, but also bringing new ones to the table at the BEF. So really excited to have you there as well.
Thank you so much. Vincent, I introduced you several times, but not completely. So you're the co-CEO and Chief Science Officer at OceanX, a non-profit organization that realizes advanced marine exploration on a very impressive vessel, which is actually in Cape Town these days. I had the opportunity to visit yesterday. Your reaction on this discussion, how science and finance can work together maybe, and you have only 2 minutes or 3.
I can do it in 2.
So thank you.
So thank you all. I heard a lot about finance investment in the ocean. We're sort of an ocean organization that's spent the past 15 years driving around all of your oceans and studying all of your waters, many of you anyway, many as we can. We're here in Africa with the vessel on part of our Trans-Africa trip. What I want to just say is that as an organization that collects data around the ocean it's crucial, I think, and essential for all of you that you get the right information to de-risk and to help you evaluate investments. And so what I would like to say is that a vessel and a research organization like ours, it's a little bit of a plug, is a great place for you to look, because we're both, we both engage private philanthropy and we engage public funds as we research and study the ocean. And you really do not want to make any of these future investments without a good knowledge of where you're going, an unbiased knowledge of the spaces that you're working in. And we deal specifically and largely in the deep ocean, and that's a very challenging place for all of you. You're all going to want to be there soon, and you want to be there informed and de-risked. And what I can say about the type of work that our organization does in collaboration with a number of partners is to study and understand, and I'll use a word that we all familiar with here, and de-risk those, and also manage and monitor those and be an implementation partner for you when you're doing that kind of work. I think you're going to have a lot of players in the field that are going to offer information, but without access to it. For example, fisheries is incredibly data poor. I mean, if you're in any other industry where you have a lot of data, fisheries is a really major important industry, especially even in this area, is incredibly data poor. So you're going out there in the dark, what you're doing. And I can only encourage that you support and take advantage of organizations like ourselves and invent new ones to help you collect the data about this very unknown, unexplored space on the Earth that you're about to dive into and should dive into, and I can encourage it strongly. The potential that we see out there is remarkable. And our company was founded by Ray Dalio, who some of you may know, who has some credentials in the finance world, and he came to us with OceanX as an idea and invented this idea because he feels there's enormous business and opportunity and potential for banks in the area. So I will cut it there to be on time.
Thank you. Another part. Thank you, opening up indeed the deep ocean. Thank you so much. So can we just reconfirm when, for those who are available, we meet again to work on this coalition?
Yes,
please,
thank you. So we will meet on Friday, this Friday, at 10:45 until 12:45, or maybe before, at boardroom 2.35, which is in the main conference center, 2.35, with all the members of the coalition, of the Ocean Coalition, but we do welcome any other banks or other partners interested to collaborate with us and work together for the ocean. So we hope to see you there on Friday, 10:45. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and round of applause for everybody. Almost on time, so it's perfect. Thank you very much.